Life is often a matter of seeing truth, hidden in the strangest places, niggling hints of a vastness that reaches through and beyond the obvious. For example, there was this car rolling down the road with a collection of 3 bumper stickers. The first one read, "My other car is a broom." The second one was curious too. It was written in beautiful calligraphy, and it was hard to make out, but when you did make it out, it said, "Blessed be." I thought that was nice. But it was the third one that carried the revelation. We are all light disguised as matter. We are all light disguised as matter. I suppose that's about as close a definition of transfiguration that we're going to get. I've also heard it put another way. We aren't material beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a material existence. And like all things that pretend to be profound, there is the possibility of an heretical twist in the midst of it. But today we're going to be looking at something that is outstanding and difficult to comprehend if we only allow our rational minds to be the minds that are at work in perceiving. As this story goes, especially in Luke's version we have heard today, Peter, James, and John walked up the mountaintop with Jesus and witnessed the brilliant love God has for Jesus in a bodily transfiguration in which he becomes radiant. The story describes Jesus as filled with a holy light, and he glows with what we might call a heavenly illumination right there on the mountaintop. The story is told so that we might be reminded that whatever else we may think of Jesus, and no matter how we feel about these coming weeks on the road to Jerusalem and death, there was in this man, in his earthly walk, a radiant truth of both person and of character. The story of Christ's transfiguration is an invitation to a certain more liberated and liberating way of seeing. It's an invitation to see light in the people that surround us. Most of the time we seem quite content to live in a thick fog of the ordinary, and we expect our lives to be normal, mostly predictable, and we often hope for nothing out of the ordinary to happen to us. In fact, some of us work hard to obtain an illusion of control in ordering our lives so that we screen out the possibility that we might see ourselves or we might see those that we love in a different light. It makes us feel better if we have that sense of control. So if we're going to learn to see in a new way, it's going to require from us a transformation of our desires, a change in the way we understand things, and a change in the way we act on that new understanding. So transformation is hard work. Receiving new sight requires letting go of very comfortable ways we have grown to perceive the world. If we don't let go, we won't perceive what James and Peter and John did on the mountaintop. We will not be able to see that which God is trying to reveal to us today. Paul puts it this way: what no eye has seen, God has revealed through the Holy Spirit. But even if God's doing the revealing, we have to do the receiving. We have to be ready. We have to be prepared. 35 years ago, I stood in Becca's parents' home in Port Huron, Michigan, about an hour north of Detroit, right there on the beautiful Lake Huron. I was on the far side of the family kitchen from the sink where Becca's grandmother, whom everyone knew as Nana, was peeling potatoes at the sink. She was unaware of me being in the room, and she was steadily at her work. She was about 85 years old then, and her arthritic joints were having a hard time working at all, and especially against the skin of the potato she was working on. And in that moment, something profound started happening inside of me. I started wondering how many thousands of potatoes she had peeled in just that way over the years. That her hands at age 15 were young and vital, and then at 30 as well. And then at 50 and 60, a little harder, at 70 and 80, painful. The steel in the knife that she was using, the same knife that she had been using for decades, was worn away from so many potatoes and from those hand sharpenings of the knife. There was a big dent where the potato would be touched. And in that moment, time just sort of stretched out in both directions for me. I saw the melding of the hands and the knife, of potatoes and people, of births and death, long, rich life stories, much of it, so much of it, infused with Nana's love and her care. She was approaching death from cancer. She knew it, we all knew it. And yet there was in this presence around her something clear and right, and the word that came to me that day was perfect. It was all perfect. And I would rather hope that moment would never end. But our bearded collie whimpered. He needed to go out. And so that transfiguration ended. I wonder if they all end that way, with some mundane need, bringing us back to a present that doesn't match the other moment. To see spiritually is to learn a new way of seeing with innocence and trust, with appreciation and wonder. It allows imagination some free space in which to move and make connections. To see spiritually is risky because other folks can think you're just downright foolish, and you might begin to think that you are as well. If we're going to see in new ways, we've got to be ready to let go of old ideas and learn to embrace new visions and possibilities. Up there on that mountaintop just outside of Caesarea Philippi, Peter is so impressed with what he is seeing in the transfiguring light of Jesus' faiths. He's so awed by what's going on that he wants to set up permanent camp there and make an idol out of the moment that he has experienced. He doesn't understand that savoring that moment does not mean that time needs to freeze right there. And he doesn't understand that the moment he's experienced that was so powerful for him is already transforming him into someone who is bolder and better and more faithful to Jesus. I think we are so much like Peter. When we have those peak experiences coming to us, we want to turn them into endpoints rather than way stations. But God's got a plan for us. God is going to use the splendor of those moments when they come and use them to declare to us that it is now time for us to return to our lives and that they will become lives of service in which the marvelous light that we have perceived is now going to be shared with the world. Some years ago, I told you a part of my summer of 1967. I was 14 years old, and my parents had given me permission to join about 12 other 14-year-olds in spending the summer in Sincelejo, Colombia. We were exchange students. We were staying in the homes of some well-to-do people in town, and we went to school each day, and we went to their cultural events, and we learned a great deal of Spanish that summer. But there's one memory that stands out of that summer, 1967. It's riding outside of town in a large white Ford LTD, sitting in the back seat of this full car and driving out in the countryside and passing through a small village as the rain drizzled down. I saw many people who were moving around in the drizzle, But suddenly, there was this image standing in the doorway of one of the huts. It was a girl, a 5-year-old or so girl, literally dressed in rags, dirty, hair disheveled, malnourished, clearly struggling just to survive. And something incredible happened in that moment. In that moment, maybe because of her age or her size or her facial expression, I don't know what it was. In that moment, she became that girl in Columbia, and she also became my 5-year-old sister, Becky. It was the strangest thing. I saw Becky's face on this girl, and I saw this girl back in Florida where Becky should be. And there was something so powerful in that moment. I felt like it was the birth of compassion in my life. It was sinking, it was painful, it hurt. But somehow there was something very good and right about it. That suffering little girl still lives in my mind. And I see her as that symbol of what can happen to us if we allow ourselves to let go of that tight rein of our thinking that normally guides us through the day. And if we can be open to other ways in which God is going to use those people around us to teach us things, we need to be discerning. Sometimes what it is that we experience in those moments is so powerful and positive that we want to build tents and live there forever. And sometimes it's so painful, so painful. But the response to that pain is also a call to service, and that becomes very clear in those moments. One more bumper sticker. This one put out by I call it our sister denomination, our partner denomination, the United Church of Christ, with whom we do all of our overseas mission work. Their bumper sticker reads, to believe is to care, and to care is to do. Even though it's tempting to try to live up on that mountaintop and to stay in that experience, it's meant to bring us back down with power into the valley, where we can take that wonderful experience of light and joy, and we can bring it to a world which is filled with far too much pain and despair and longing and need. There's so many people who are afraid of so much. I don't know if you paid attention to the recent presidential debates, but if you just go to those, you'll see a litany of things that we should fear or we do fear. We are to be bearers of the light down into the valley. We are to be the bearers of hope and good news to a world that's exposed to too much poverty and too much violence. God gives us the mountaintop experiences so that we can remember that the light does shine in the darkness and that the darkness will not overcome it. The mountaintop enables us to see and feel the world as it could be, as it can be, as it ought to be. And then that glory feeds us as we need that nourishment down in the valley. Sisters and brothers, we are preparing to enter into the season of Lent later this week. I hope as we enter it, we bring with us that dazzling glory from the mountaintop, that message of epiphany, peace, and completion. Let us gird ourselves with the clothing of trust and songs of innocence that can carry us straight forward through the difficult times. For the light to shine, God's people must risk leaving the mountain to bring the transfiguring light of Jesus Christ to the world.